Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated NBA senior writer, joining us from Phoenix. He was in attendance for last night's game between the Clippers and the Suns. What's your big takeaway from last night there, Chris?
Just the resiliency of the Clippers. I mean, we've seen it throughout these playoffs, going down 2-0 in both the first and second round. But, this comeback and win in this game was maybe even more impressive to me. I mean, they learned about the injury and, the extent of the injury to Zubac at the morning shoot-around. And to already down, Serge Ibaka, Kawhi Leonard, and now being down your best big man, going up against a big physical team with a guy like DeAndre Ayton, to still be able to not only rally and win, but they came out fast, Dan. I mean, they were up 20-5 early in this game. They had multiple opportunities in the second half to fold. The Clippers have this history of not showing up in big moments. That history, regardless of what happens in this series, I think has been largely erased because of the performance of this team.
But you try to handicap this series. I wasn't surprised, said I wouldn't be surprised if the Clippers won last night, because why not? Now they go back home where you would expect the Clippers to win. So what do you expect here in Game 6?
I have no idea. There's an argument to be made that, this was kind of the Clippers shooting their shot here. This was everything they had left in the tank. I mean, Paul George, look at the minutes Paul George has played in this post. I think it's like 735, which is like 130 more than anybody else in these playoffs. I mean, sitting in the interview room after the game, I mean, he looked exhausted. Marcus Morris, who has battled a knee injury of his own, had to go 41 minutes largely against DeAndre Ayton. He looked exhausted. I mean, there's only so many, proverbial bullets they have left in the chamber. And, going home, I'm sure they'll get a bounce off that home crowd. And, one thing these Clippers players said last night to a man was that, they knew they were down 3-1, but, they looked at it like a couple of breaks here or there, the valley-oop, better offense in Game 4. They could have been up 3-1 in this series. So they've got a little bit of confidence, but at some point, all these injuries start to take their toll. And if Zubac can't go in this Game 6, I just have a hard time seeing Ayton struggle as much as he did and the Suns play as poorly defensively as they did.
What is Kawhi Leonard's status?
I wouldn't expect to see him in these playoffs.
No matter, even if it goes Game 7?
I don't believe it.
Okay.
I have not heard any indications. And Kawhi, as we all know, plays everything kind of close to the chest. But, you get you talk to Clippers personnel, whether it's on site or, via text message, you just don't get positive indications that Kawhi is coming back. I don't know the full extent of that injury, if it is something that may require surgery down the line, but there are no indications yet that Kawhi is, a return is imminent.
But is this an injury that is going to stay with him, or a condition that is going to stay with him the rest of his career?
Well, it's hard to say with this injury specifically. Now, he has had that knee problem that has need to be load managed since his days at San Antonio. I would say that particular version of the injury is going to be with him for his entire career. I mean, Kawhi, I forget how old he is, right around 30 at this point. But so I don't expect that to change anytime soon. So with the course of an 82-game season, we're going to see Kawhi at most play 60, 65 games for the rest of his career. This injury felt a little bit different. This was one of those, kind of injuries in the moment that where we may find out later that it was an ACL injury that requires some type of surgery. But there's the day of Kawhi Leonard, Dan, playing 80 games in a season, those days are long since over.
Gosh, I don't remember those days. When's the last time he was ever close to that?
2012, maybe 2013.
Yeah.
Like we got to go back to the early San Antonio days before that injury happened that cost him almost a full season. That last full season with the Spurs. So look, it's not the end of the world. I mean, Toronto won a championship with Kawhi, being load managed throughout. I think the Clippers, you could argue if Kawhi Leonard was healthy, they'd be the favorites to win the championship this year. There's a pathway for them to win, or any team that has Kawhi Leonard to win. with him being load managed. It's just kind of a fact of life for him going forward.
Have we been unfair? We, the media, been unfair to Paul George in our expectation level?
I don't know. I think social media probably has, but social media is unfair to everybody. Social media, mostly boxing fans, hate me. Like, so, like, I mean, it's like it is kind of what it is when it comes to critiques. Now, I'm sure if Paul George could hop in the time machine, he would go back and not say what he said in that clip you played. Like, he would not call himself playoff P. Like, that has kind of stuck to him like white on rice there. And it ratcheted up the level of expectation. If you call yourself playoff P and then you subsequently have back-to-back early playoff exits in Oklahoma City, you blow a 3-1 lead with the Clippers, that is going to be something you are tagged with for the rest of his career. But when you're a superstar and you don't win championships, I mean, LeBron James gets criticized still. He's won multiple championships. That just kind of comes with the territory when it comes to being a player of that status.
Yeah, PG-13 we were okay with. Like, that was a nice, cute nickname, but playoff P,
Has anybody that's given themselves a nickname ever felt good about it afterwards? I'm struggling to think off the top of my head who else has given themselves nicknames, but usually, like, Shaq gave Paul Pierce the truth, and that stuck, and that worked well for Paul Pierce over his career. If somebody gives you a nickname, it's great, because even if it doesn't, even if you don't live up to it, you didn't give it to yourself. Like, it wasn't you that called yourself that. When you call yourself playoff P, you put a target on your back if you don't play like someone that lives up to those expectations.
Well, Dion called himself primetime, but
lived up to it.
Lived up to it.
Yeah. Like, if you can call yourself primetime,
you know what?
If you call yourself the greatest of all time, like, and certainly is in the discussion for that as or a favorite to be called that. I mean, if somebody calls himself MVP, if that's what he did and he won multiple MVPs, you lived up to it. But if you're playoff P and you struggle, look, I do think this is the best postseason he's had since his Indiana days. Maybe better because of he's put in a position without a Danny Granger or David West that are around him. I mean, look, he was shooting 35% going into that game 5, and you look at the first half, and he was pretty passive, and you could see kind of the critics start to warm up. And I think even I wasn't listening to it, but I had seen tweets about the broadcast were criticizing Paul George for that first half. And then to come out in the third quarter, just blow the doors off, 20 points. They get 3 3-pointers in that period. I mean, that was a playoff P level performance for Paul George.
Talking to Chris Mannix, the Sports Illustrated NBA senior writer. Why do boxing fans hate you?
They think my scorecards suck. I do that for DAZN, and boxing's polarizing though. Everybody thinks they know exactly what they're talking about. It's probably one of the worst sports for that.
Okay, I just wanted
it's there.
Yeah,
watch a big fight. Monitor on social media. It's interesting.
I don't do social media.
That's true. Paulie does though, so he can text you.
By the way, social media yesterday was Scottie Pippen. Were you monitoring social media?
I was. I saw McLovin's tweets first and foremost, and then I saw the clip. I mean, I'll be the umpteenth person to tell you, tremendous interview with Scottie. I mean, I thought you did everything you could to get to the root of the racism charge, which is the big one that's out there. I didn't think he had a single answer that made any sense. So I had people texting me afterwards, NBA people that were just, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but like, does Scottie need some help, after this? What's going through his mind right now that he would sit there and make a racism charge? I mean, look, he's been upset about the Tony Kukoc play for decades now. Like, that's never going to change, despite the fact that Kukoc made the shot, like he hit the shot and helped the Bulls advance. Scottie's still upset about it, but there's no evidence that Phil Jackson is a racist in any way, shape, or form. Players that have played for him have never charged him with that before. That's an ugly thing to say unless you have specific examples to back it up. And, I watched the interview a couple of times. He doesn't seem to have one single example to back it up. I mean, and there was a lot of weird things like Michael Jordan, controlling the cameras. Like now we're getting into tinfoil hat conspiracy where he's, He's telling Steve Kerr he's going to pass him the ball because the camera that he controls is watching it. He's thinking about his documentary 20 years later. There's just a lot of dot connecting that Scottie was doing in that moment that didn't make a lot of sense.
The Damian Lillard situation in Portland. I can you clear, like, what is the situation? Because I'm not sure if he wants out. Is this passive aggressive? Is there something going on with what his future is going to be in Portland?
Well, Chauncey Billups gets introduced as the next head coach today. And my understanding is they're going to all try to get into a room and figure out if this is salvageable with Damian Lillard. I grow more and more skeptical by the day, Dan, that it is. You know, I said this on my podcast this morning, but like Damian Lillard is like the guy breaking up with the girlfriend for the first time. Like he wants to break up with her, but he doesn't know how to. So he's going about it in kind of a ham-handed type of way. And that's what Dame's been doing. And it's not just the last couple of days. You go back to the immediate aftermath of the loss to the Nuggets. And he had this cryptic tweet that was a cryptic Instagram post that was out there about how many times do I have to keep doing this with the same result. He then somewhat bizarrely goes out there and throws his support behind Jason Kidd, of all people, to be the head coach of the Trailblazers. And there have been more, obviously, social media posts in the last couple of days as well. Look, I don't think this is about the coach. I don't think it's about Blazers fans criticizing him for his involvement in the coaching search. I think plain and simple, Damian Lillard at 31 years old is looking at the Trailblazers roster and saying, I can't win. And I can't argue with him with that. I mean, they got beat by a Denver Nuggets team without its second best player that subsequently went out and got absolutely smoked by the Phoenix Suns in 4 games. That loss has not aged well for the Trailblazers. So I think what it comes down to for Lillard, as loyal as he's been to Portland, is that he wants to win as he in the final prime years of his career. And this is kind of his sort of somewhat clumsy way of going out and forcing that. The irony of all this, Dan, is that I think a Damian Lillard trade is the best thing for both sides. Lillard can find his way to a new situation, give himself a chance to win. And Portland, which has really no chance to win at the highest level with Damian Lillard the next couple of years, can recoup one of, if not the biggest trade haul in recent NBA history. I mean, Lillard has that type of value on the open market. So this is kind of it's an awkward situation right now, but in the next few weeks, even maybe months, if Damian Lillard is traded, that could wind up being the best thing for both sides.
Okay, but the most likely destination, and do not say the New York Knicks.
No, I mean, and by the way, please, Lakers fans, stop like sending your trade machine things out that include like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as the centerpiece of a deal. Like that's unless you're dealing Anthony Davis, you're probably not getting Damian Lillard. 2 things to remember with Davis. You're gonna, or with Lillard, you're gonna work with him on a trade. You're not just gonna dump him like on Oklahoma City or something like that, where he can play the final few years of his contract out. You're gonna work with him on where he wants to go, and you're gonna have to find a situation where he can win. That means going to a team with at least 1 second star that's on it. Then you start to look at the return you get. Like, you're not dealing Damian Lillard for Bradley Beal, because Bradley Beal, while being 28 years old and still a great player, has 1 year left in his contract that is not going to stay in Portland beyond 1 season. So you're looking for kind of what, say, Oklahoma City got, where they got a blue chip young player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a haul of draft picks. Using those as the early parameters, I would say there are 2 teams right off the bat that stand out. One is Philadelphia, because Ben Simmons is still out there and the Sixers still have their draft capital over the next few years. Simmons is signed through 2025. And as flawed as he is, he's still a perennial all-star at 24 years old, who, if he ever fixes his shot, has the potential to be great. The other, it's Boston. I can't believe we're doing this once again, where the Celtics are in the mix for another superstar, but here we are. Boston has Jaylen Brown. He's 24 years old. He's an all-star for the first time. He gets better every single year. You can build a trade package around Jaylen Brown, a lot of the young players they have in Boston, and their cache of draft picks over the years as well. It's like we're very early in this process, and because Lillard is signed through 2025, you're probably going to have teams try to sneak in and find a deal that works. But when this started to pick up, those were the first two teams that I thought of that are also, by the way, in the Eastern Conference, where you don't have to deal with Damian Lillard for more than 2 times a season and never have to deal with him in the playoffs.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate your time as always, bud.
You got it, Dan.
That's Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated NBA senior writer.